When you think of mussels or barnacles, I'm betting you think they live a pretty boring, stationary life, cemented to a rock, right?
So many animals that live in the ocean start their life with an ocean journey.
Matt Whalen studies marine biodiversity on Calvert Island here on the central coast of British Columbia. But he's not interested in mussels or barnacles the way we might think of them. He's more interested in their early days. You see, these animals hatch from their eggs into a microscopic larval form that looks a lot different from how they end up looking as adults.
And they can be potentially transported for many, many kilometers from where they were hatched from an egg to where they wind up living as an adult. Some animals actually cement themselves for their whole life to a rock. But what you don't know when you look at those animals is that they've been on an ocean journey for potentially months at a time.
When these larval animals do finally land somewhere to join other adults, we call this recruitment. Next, they will metamorphosize into their adult form. In just minutes, this tiny ribbon worm breaks out of its larval body and then devours it.
One of my favorite things that I've seen, though, is when you can actually capture the sort of transitional life stages for some of these animals. So in many of my devices, I find very tiny crabs, and they still have some of the characteristics of the larval form. So they look like a crab, but they have a tail, and they can swim.
To find out where these organisms settle, Whalen and his team have employed highly scientific devices, aka kitchen scrubbers and PVC plates, in different ocean environments. There are hundreds of these planted around Calvert Island, and Whalen and his support team of divers from the Hakai Institute check on them every month or two to see what settled and when. Once the brushes and plates are collected, they're carefully taken to the lab at our Calvert Island Ecological Observatory, where scientific diver Kyle Hall extracts the tiny organisms who have staked a claim on the brushes.
So because there's so much surface area in here, everything likes to hide and it actually gets pinched in between the bristles. So we're trying to get all that out. So we have to really agitate it and spread out the bristles in different ways. And we can actually take the forceps and go in there and pick things out. This is a petri dish full of stuff that we pulled off this brush. So we have a whole bunch of different amphipods. And we have some snails in here. There's a really nice flatworm in here.
In the 3 years Whalen's been doing this research, patterns have begun to emerge.
In the summertime, we see really high abundance of tiny mussels that recruit across all the habitats that I look at. And in the springtime, we really see a lot of barnacles that show up on the shore.
He's also come across some real stumpers.
When I went to Calvert in April of 2018, I was shocked to find in my little brushes that I put in the kelp forest that each of those was full of hundreds of baby sea cucumbers. In fact, I'm not sure still what species of sea cucumber those are, but with the help of some of our DNA barcoding, I'm hoping that we can discover which species we're dealing with.
Studying these tiny creatures is not without its challenges. Some of the species they encounter are as small as a flake of pepper or a grain of rice. So Whalen spends a lot of time at the microscope. But these tiny organisms are not to be underestimated.
A lot of times we think about these little larvae as being passive drifters, simply at the mercy of ocean currents. In fact, the word plankton means ocean wanderer. And yet, the more and more we study the biology of some of these animals, we learn that they do have some control over where they go.
Whalen also works with a global recruitment study called ARMS, or Autonomous Reef Monitoring Structures.
Basically what they are underwater invertebrate hotels.
12 of these little underwater hotels have been hosting bottom communities in kelp forests around Calvert Island since 2016, and won't be retrieved until 2020. The Global ARMS project studies recruitment in more than 50 locations around the world, from Panama to the Philippines. Recruitment teaches us a lot about the resilience of the ocean and a population's ability to regenerate after trauma. Right now, we don't know a lot about why certain species seem to prefer to recruit in certain areas or at certain times of the year. Is it something in the environment that draws them? Or is it their internal clock telling them it's time to latch on to something?
The beauty of a lot of this work is there's a lot of mystery in the world that we still don't understand the way the world works in fundamental ways.
Through his work looking at recruitment patterns, Whalen and his team can speculate how life will respond as the ocean changes. The answers, as is so often the case, are just under our nose. Just don't overlook these tiny ocean wanderers.